Wait, you're the janitor who rewrote our $100 million algorithm. The voice cut through the boardroom like a blade. Half disbelief, half challenge. But Isaac Callahan didn't flinch. He'd survived combat zones, buried teammates, raised a daughter alone, and now, all it took was one red marker on a forgotten whiteboard to shake the core of a billion-dollar tech empire. What came next? No one saw coming, and it all started with the one mistake they forgot to erase. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Raleigh at night was quiet in the way only corporate districts could be sterile. Humming, indifferent. Vanguard Synertech's headquarters stood like a monolith in the Research Triangle Park. All chrome edges and tinted glass, glowing coal blue under the streetlights. The kind of place where mistakes cost millions and no one ever made the same one twice because they didn't get the chance. Inside, the tension was thick enough to press into skin. 17 engineers, 6 emergency meetings, 3 days, $500,000 in consulting fees. And still, the numbers didn't line up. The walls of the Level 6 boardroom were covered in screens green, red, white text on black, each flickering with telemetry data. Failure rates, heat maps, bleeding like wounds. At the far end stood Eleanor Stratton, CEO of Vanguard Synertech, arms folded, spine straight, eyes colder than the room's recycled air. "This is unacceptable," she said. No one replied. No one dared. An entire predictive system compromised. Latency spikes. Training error off by 16%. Our largest defense contract hanging by a thread, and all I see are theories and excuses. Jason Reed shifted in his seat, clearing his throat like a man about to say something he might regret. "We've ruled out syntax errors, ran simulations through every framework. We think the issue." "You think," Eleanor interrupted, "not unkind, but merciless. I don't pay for thoughts. I pay for answers." She turned, heels clicking once on the polished floor before the door whispered shut behind her. Silence followed, thicker than the stress-glazed air. Down the corridor, past the frosted glass wall of the executive floor. A man knelt by a vending machine. He wore a faded navy custodial shirt, the name Isaac stitched in sun-bleached thread. One earbud dangled loose, the other tucked behind his ear. His left knee cracked softly as he stood up, balancing a bag of recycling on one arm and a bucket of sanitizer in the other. Isaac Callahan had worked at Vanguard for 19 months, third-shift maintenance. He clocked in when the building emptied out, when lights dimmed and the brilliance quieted. But tonight, his eyes didn't follow his mop. They drifted past the glass, toward the massive digital whiteboard left glowing in the abandoned war room. Equations sprawled across it like panic-corrupted logic loops. Misweighted neural paths. Linear assumptions tangled with nonlinear outcomes. A mess, but a familiar one. He stared at it for a moment too long, long enough for a memory to stir. There had been a time when code like that flowed through his veins before uniforms were traded for wingtips, before combat drones learned to think faster than their handlers, before the last mission, back when he was still Captain Isaac Callahan, Joint Task Force, Ghost Signal. 3rd Intelligence Division, but that chapter was over, buried under flags and folded into classified silence. His daughter, Nora, had brought him back. That, and a promise at a hospital bedside, one he wouldn't break. He turned away from the glass, but the math clung to his mind. An hour later, he found himself in the boardroom. No one had locked it. No one expected the janitor to walk in with anything but a mop. The room still hummed faintly, like it remembered the shouting that had filled it earlier. Isaac leaned the mop against the wall, slowly approached the whiteboard, and squinted. Something about the output pattern didn't sit right. He recognized the structure it was trying to model behavioral drift using linear reinforcement, which worked if your data was static. This wasn't. His fingers hovered near the screen. He shouldn't. But the same instinct that once told him to duck before a bullet hit now told him this was wrong. Dangerous wrong. He reached for the digital marker, a sigmoid curve in place of a flat line linear response, swapped 2 variable weights, a adjusted a loop interval by milliseconds, and lastly, he drew a circle around a single node, one that didn't belong in the regression layer. He stepped back, eyed the changes like a soldier scanning for hidden traps, then nodded to himself. Still teaching old tricks. Huh, he whispered, more to the code than anyone else. Just took off the uniform. He was about to wipe it all clean, erase the proof, return to invisibility when a voice cut through the air behind him. You think you've got it right? It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakably firm. Isaac turned. There she was, Eleanor Stratton, CEO, builder of empires, known for firing COOs in less time than it took to stir cream into her coffee. Her expression unreadable, hands in her coat pockets, blazer sharp as glass. I wasn't trying to interfere, Isaac said, suddenly self-aware of the bleach smell on his sleeves. I just saw something off in the math. She stepped into the room, eyes still locked on the board. She tapped her tablet once, ran a simulation against the adjusted formula. 8 seconds. Then she blinked. 18.4% accuracy boost, she said flatly. Latency down 12 milliseconds. You circled the misweighted node. He nodded. It was bleeding energy into redundant feedback. Another pause. Name, she asked. Isaac Callahan. Role custodial. 3 nights a week. Education. He hesitated. Classified, but formerly Joint Task Force. She didn't react. Why leave because ghosts don't get to raise daughters? Fathers do. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something unexpected. Conference room 2C. Tomorrow. 800 observer seat. I don't need to be in meetings, he replied instinctively. That wasn't a request. Mr. Callahan, he glanced sideways. I have a daughter, Nora. Mornings are, she'll have snacks and zoo tickets, if necessary. He almost laughed. Instead, he lowered his gaze. She doesn't need much. Just one reason to believe her dad's still worth being proud of. Eleanor's face didn't change, but something about her posture shifted by an inch, maybe less. Enough for Isaac to feel it. Then she left, the door closing behind her as quietly as it had earlier. He turned back to the whiteboard. The red circle still glowed. That night, Nora wouldn't go to sleep until he told her the whole story. You really said that, she asked, curled under a blanket fort. Sort of, he said. I said it with fewer words and more sweat. You weren't scared. He brushed a curl behind her ear. Sweetheart, when you've watched your team vanish on a hillside at 3:00 and told your daughter why her mom won't be home again, CEOs don't scare you. She blinked, then smiled. The kind of smile that saw through armor. I think she likes you. He chuckled, kissed her forehead, and stared at the ceiling long after she fell asleep. By 7:45 the next morning, he stood in front of conference room 2C. He wore the cleanest button-down he owned, still creased, still honest. His old tactical satchel slung over his shoulder, inside it a notepad, a pencil, and Nora's latest drawing. A man with a mop in one hand, a lightning bolt in the other. Inside the room, voices buzzed, screens lit with projections, charts, and predictive loops. The air smelled of coffee, mint gum, and nervousness. Then she walked in, Eleanor Stratton. The room shifted the moment she did like gravity had entered. She glanced once at Isaac. A precise look. Take the seat near the wall. He sat. No questions. Yesterday, she began. We watched a system fail. Not entirely, but enough to expose something dangerous, the illusion of stability. Overnight, someone reframed the equation. The result, she tapped her screen. The redrawn loop flashed into place. Training error down 60%. Latency improvement confirmed. More importantly, she paused. Expertise can look very different than what we expect. Heads turned, briefly, toward Isaac, then quickly looked away. But she didn't look away, and for the first time in years, Neither did he. By the next morning, the algorithm had a name. Internally, it was tagged as loop revision zeta, though no one said it out loud. What they said instead was, "Did you see the accuracy bump?" or "Where the hell did that curve come from?" Most assumed it was a late-night intervention from someone on the data team, or maybe a consultant. No one guessed janitor. That possibility didn't fit their model, but Frank Devlin knew. The Vanguard CTO had watched from the mezzanine above conference room 2C, arms crossed, coffee cooling in hand. He'd heard whispers, seen the code adjustments, and quietly pulled the audit logs. The system didn't lie. The user ID belonged to custodial access level 4A, the tag name Isaac Callahan. Frank didn't say anything that morning, just watched Eleanor Stratton's face as she tapped through the simulation outputs. There was something in her expression, not surprise, not even curiosity, recognition, as if she'd seen this kind of correction before, but not in a long time. Isaac didn't have a badge to reach most levels, but he noticed things. How conversations shifted when he entered the hallway. How engineers stood straighter when Eleanor passed. How no one really smiled past 5 p.m. After his appearance in 2C, the cleaning assignments changed. No longer random. Each night now placed him closer to R&D floors, adjacent to labs running deep learning stress tests. Coincidence? He didn't ask. Eleanor hadn't spoken to him since that morning. No further instructions, no explanations, just access. Each night, the mop came with him, but so did the notepad. Inside it, lines of logic began to reappear. Old habits, notations drawn from another life. The kind of scribbles that once lived in field kits and encrypted satellite laptops. Back when predictions weren't used to optimize retail, when they were used to stay alive. 10 years earlier, Isaac had written a model not unlike Vanguard's current framework. Only his version had operated in real-time threat environments. It had to interpret fragmented inputs, movement noise, heat signatures, language patterns, and extrapolate enemy intent. Back then, lives depended on clarity, not aesthetics. The key flaw now was all too familiar. Vanguard's system assumed linear pressure points, but human behavior, especially under tension, never followed straight lines. That was the first lesson in the field, and the one most civilians forgot. They'd built a billion-dollar framework on a wrong assumption, and he couldn't pretend not to see it. One night, just past 11, Jason Reed caught him outside a data corridor. Jason was tall, crisp, always looked like he just stepped out of a TED Talk. His badge bounced slightly as he walked, and his voice always arrived a split second before he did. "You Callahan?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Isaac nodded, keeping his eyes on the panel he was cleaning. Jason tilted his head, assessing him like a puzzle piece in the wrong box. "So? You're the guy who rewrote our reinforcement logic. I just corrected the direction," Isaac said evenly. "Huh?" Jason smiled without warmth. "You know we've had 3 PhDs chew on that loop for a year." Isaac said nothing. "Must be nice," Jason continued. "Coming in from the sidelines, no pressure, no expectations. You get to surprise people. It's not about surprising them," Isaac replied, straightening up. "It's about preventing another system from learning the wrong lesson too well." Jason blinked, caught off guard, then scoffed, shook his head, and walked away. The next morning, Eleanor forwarded Isaac an internal access link, Observer Seat Level 2. It wasn't full team integration, but it meant he could sit in on model testing reviews. He didn't say yes. He just showed up. The chairs were all filled when he entered, so he stood along the back wall, notebook tucked under one arm. No one offered him a seat. A few nodded politely. Most didn't look twice. Eleanor didn't acknowledge him either. Not directly, but she called up the Zeta loop on screen again and used the phrase unconventional insight without attribution. Frank, seated near the front, glanced briefly over his shoulder, then back to his notes. That night, Nora was still awake when Isaac came home. She was building a robot out of cereal boxes and old markers, cross-legged on the living room floor. "You're late," she said. Not accusing, just stating facts. "I stayed for a meeting." "With the shiny lady?" He smiled. "Yes, with the shiny lady." "Did she say thank you?" "No, but she let me listen." "That's like half a thank you." She stood, held up her robot. One arm was a spoon taped to a juice box. "His name's Revisi. Why? Because he's really good at changing his mind." Isaac knelt and took the robot gently in his hands. "That's a rare skill," he said. "Most people forget how." "Do you?" "I'm learning again." As days passed, the office settled into a strange rhythm. The engineers didn't talk to Isaac much, but they no longer ignored him, either. One left him a spare monitor. Another pointed out a broken vent that needed reclipping. Small things. Quiet bridges. Frank started stopping by the lab more often. Never said much, just hovered. Watched. Sometimes left post-it notes near Isaac's workstation with single-word questions. Trajectory, variability, trust. Isaac answered in diagrams. It was their language. Eleanor stayed distant, but not absent. She'd pause near Isaac's screen now and then, ask a brief question, then vanish before the answer was done. Once, she dropped a file on his desk labeled nonlinear parallel sampling. Experimental. No comment, just walked away. He took it as permission one evening while sanitizing the secondary conference room. Isaac found himself alone with Jason again. This time, Jason didn't smile. "You know this won't last," he said. Isaac kept wiping the table. "They'll thank you quietly and move on loudly. That's how this place works. I'm not here to be thanked," Isaac said calmly. "I'm here because a system is broken." Jason stepped closer. "You think this is noble, but it's naive." Isaac turned, looked him in the eye. "I've seen what happens when systems fail and no one speaks up. I'd rather be naive than silent." Jason didn't respond. He left with his jaw tight. Later that night, Isaac wrote out a single line in his notebook. "Some rooms reward visibility. Others reward silence. But both can kill you if you wait too long to move." He didn't know if it was wisdom or just exhaustion, but it stayed with him. By the end of that week, Eleanor requested an informal debrief in the East Annex, not her office. Not the boardroom, just a quiet table near the rooftop garden. No laptops, no digital eyes. Isaac arrived 5 minutes early. She was already there. "You've read the file," she said, not asking. "I did, and you're still modeling prediction as reflection. It needs to behave like anticipation." She nodded once. "You know that approach hasn't been vetted by our compliance team." "I'm not here to follow your paths," he replied. "I'm here to offer exits you haven't seen." Eleanor smiled faintly. "That's the most honest answer I've heard all month." A pause. "Why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" Isaac looked out over the skyline. "Because no one cares where ghosts come from, only what they disturb." She didn't reply, but she didn't leave. That night, as Nora drifted off to sleep beside her duct tape robot, Isaac sat at the edge of the couch with his notebook open. He wasn't writing formulas. He was drawing something else, a loop, but this time, not a machine, a cycle of trust, betrayal, insight, and return. And in the middle, a single word, Nora. He stared at it until his vision blurred. Then he turned the page. Tomorrow would bring more silence, more tension, more tests. But for tonight, he'd remembered why he stepped into that room in the first place. Not for himself, but because his daughter deserved a world where brilliance didn't have to wear a badge to be seen. The Ashcroft Summit Pavilion didn't look like a place built for truth. Crystal chandeliers, velvet seats, tabletops that gleamed like still water. It was the kind of space where people wore armor stitched from credentials, and every breath cost a little pride. Isaac stood behind the curtain, adjusting his collar. Nora had insisted he wear the blue shirt, the one without stains. It didn't help that it still felt borrowed from a life he never planned to return to. Behind him, voices buzzed investors, board members, analysts with sharp smiles and sharper pens. He wasn't supposed to be here, and everyone knew it. Frank Devlin stepped up beside him, offered a quiet nod. No pep talk, just presence. That was enough. Across the room, Eleanor Stratton stood near the back, arms folded, gaze locked on the stage. Her heels didn't shift, her expression didn't waver, but there was something steady about her stillness. The event host tapped the mic once, then spoke into the ballroom. Today's final presentation comes from someone unexpected. No PowerPoint, no corporate summary, just a voice we've learned to listen to because he listens better than most. A pause. Please welcome Isaac Callahan. There was a murmur audible, sharp, then silenced by politeness. The janitor, the one who rewrote the loop, the one with no degree on file. Isaac stepped onto the stage, one breath held tight in his chest. No slides, just a handheld mic and a blank screen behind him. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't scan the room. He just began. I was supposed to mop this floor tonight. That earned a few chuckles, not mocking, just surprised. 6 weeks ago, I was wiping fingerprints off glass boards after midnight, not because I had nothing better to do, but because fingerprints leave patterns, and patterns tell stories if you look close enough. He took a slow step forward. You've all seen the Zeta loop by now. The code's cleaner, the output tighter, but that's not what matters. He glanced down at the note in his palm. Nora's handwriting, a stick figure holding a lightning bolt. He smiled and then looked up. What matters is why the system was broken. The room went quiet. It wasn't the math. It wasn't the model. It was the mindset. You were trying to teach machines how to mimic behavior, but behavior doesn't follow rules. It follows need, pressure, fear, hope. He let that sit for a moment. When I was deployed overseas, we used AI to detect intent, threat recognition, but the systems kept failing because we assumed logic worked the same under fire. He paused. They don't. Another step. Eventually, we realized you can't model trust using straight lines. It has to bend. It has to remember. It has to adapt faster than it explains itself. He drew a small sketch on the screen by hand, a looping line, nothing fancy. This isn't innovation, he said quietly. It's correction, and I didn't invent it. I just stopped long enough to see what was already there. Jason Reed shifted in his seat. He raised a hand, didn't wait to be called. With all due respect, he said, tone tight. This presentation lacks rigor. We're basing enterprise-level strategy on bedtime analogies. A few nods followed, hesitant, but real. Jason didn't stop. We're a billion-dollar firm. Our partners expect technical documentation, vetting, credibility. This he gestured toward Isaac. Isn't that? He folded his arms like a closing statement. Isaac didn't flinch. He stepped forward again. You want rigor, run the model. You want proof. Look at the error margins. He pointed to the small loop diagram. If this had come from a Stanford grad in a $1, $200 jacket, we'd be calling it visionary. But because it came from someone who once held a mop, it's suspect. He shook his head. The math didn't change. Your perception did. Jason opened his mouth, but Isaac didn't let him. Let me ask you something, he said calmly. If I'd worn the right tie, would the code have been more accurate? Silence? If my resume listed the same truths, but from a higher floor, would that make the system more secure? He stepped back slightly. If you're ignoring solutions because of the hands that hold them, maybe the problem isn't the algorithm. Frank sat forward, quietly impressed. Eleanor didn't move. She didn't have to. Her voice rang from the back of the room. Vanguard will implement the Zeta loop company-wide. Several heads turned. She continued. It's already passed internal stress tests. reduced error by 60%, increased behavioral alignment across independent datasets. A pause. We didn't ask Mr. Callahan to solve our problem. He saw it, then he fixed it. That's the kind of mind we claim to value until it shows up in a uniform we didn't expect. She nodded once. We'll adjust our expectations. That was the end of it. After the meeting, Isaac didn't linger. He found the nearest service corridor and walked until the walls stopped pulsing with voices. The hallway was quiet, dim, familiar. He leaned against the wall and finally exhaled. No victory dance, no pride swelling in his chest. Just breath, tired, real breath. Frank found him a few minutes later. That was a hell of a gamble, the CTO said, offering a paper cup of black coffee. Isaac took it, nodded once. I wasn't trying to win. I know, Frank said. That's why it worked. He rode the elevator down alone. Someone had written Janitor on the whiteboard outside Lab 4B that morning. Big block letters, a joke. He erased it quietly, didn't say a word. He had bigger things to carry. That night, Nora was already in her pajamas when he walked through the door. She jumped off the couch and ran to him. You did it. I did something. Did they clap a little? Did anyone boo? He laughed, not out loud. She beamed. I made you something. She pulled a folded card from her backpack, crayon-colored, her handwriting wobbly but proud. To Daddy Solver of grown-up problems, hero of the not-scary kind. He read it 3 times, then sat on the couch and just breathed. Back at Vanguard, no one said anything the next day, but he noticed it anyway. The way conversations stopped when he entered a room, how emails went cold, how even polite nods now came with tighter lips. Jason walked past him in the hallway, didn't speak, just stared. Later, Frank told him quietly. You rattled more than the code. Isaac nodded. I wasn't trying to. I know, Frank said again, but not everyone remembers what humility looks like. That evening, Eleanor found Isaac on the rooftop terrace. She said nothing for a moment, then leaned on the railing beside him. They'll adjust, she said. Maybe. You did the job. He glanced at her. Doesn't always mean you get to keep it. She didn't argue. Instead, she asked, You ever wonder why I kept coming back to the lab? I figured it was to check the numbers. It was, she admitted. At first, he waited. Then it was because you reminded me what we're building for. Isaac turned back to the skyline. And what's that? She looked out into the dark. Something that listens. Something that doesn't care who's holding the marker. Just that they're pointing to truth. He didn't answer. But for the first time all day, he didn't feel tired. Just quiet. Settled. For now, the first sign was silence. Not the peaceful kind that followed understanding, but the stiff, airless quiet that settled when people stopped knowing what to say. Isaac felt it when he stepped into the break room and every conversation folded like paper. They didn't glare. They didn't whisper. They just stopped including him. Slack channels went quiet. His name disappeared from certain threads. Tasks he once supported informally were quietly reassigned. Frank remained the same brief nods. Coffee left without comment, but even he had begun to speak in measured tones, like trying not to draw fire. Isaac said nothing. Not to Nora, not to Eleanor, not to himself. But over the next week, his seat in the lab stayed empty, and no one asked why. The models began drifting again. Tiny inconsistencies. Output noise just above acceptable variance. Data sets that didn't align quite the way they had when the loop was tight. Jason offered explanations, updated inputs, adaptive fluctuations, system fatigue. But the truth was simpler. The one person who saw the curves before they bent wasn't watching anymore. And Eleanor noticed, not in graphs or in reports, but in the hallway by Lab 3A, where Isaac used to lean, arms crossed, sketching in his notebook without being asked. Now, only the mop bucket remained, still pushed to the side, but untouched. It wasn't his anymore, but no one dared move it either. She didn't mention it, but she noticed. 2 days later, Eleanor entered the break room after 8 p.m. A rarity. Most lights were dim, chairs stacked. Only one corkboard buzzed with color. Among coupons, lunch, shift notes, and an outdated yoga flyer, something caught her eye. A small envelope, purple crayon letters, to Ms. Eleanor from Nora. No last name, no signature. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single folded paper, stars in every corner. And in the center, written in a child's careful, serious scrawl. Thank you for believing in my dad. He used to smile when he talked about you. Now he doesn't smile much, but I still do. Nora. Age 6'3", Eleanor sat down on the bench beside the vending machine. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, quietly, she took off her heels and folded her legs underneath her, like a child, and cried. The next morning, she left the office early. No driver, no calls. She found the apartment after circling East Raleigh twice. It was older than she expected. Narrow steps, peeling paint. One shutter permanently stuck open. She knocked twice. The door opened just enough to reveal a child in a faded dinosaur shirt. You're the shiny lady, Nora said simply. The one who made my dad nervous. Eleanor blinked. Probably. You want to come in? We don't have guest chairs, but we have floor. Eleanor stepped inside. The apartment was small and warm and cluttered with life. Toys in one corner, laundry on the couch, a notebook left open on the counter filled with half-coded ideas and robot sketches. Nora marched across the room with the confidence of a general. We were building a pancake fortress, she said, but we ran out of pancake. Eleanor sat on the rug without asking. The carpet was rough under her palms, but real. Nora handed her a Lego piece. You can help with the roof, but only if you're careful. They built in silence for a while. The pieces mismatched. The foundation a little shaky. Finally, Nora said softly, he left because he thought he embarrassed you. Eleanor didn't speak. He thought people laughed. I think it hurt. It wasn't his fault, Eleanor replied. And he didn't embarrass me. Nora nodded solemnly. Do you miss him? Eleanor exhaled. Yes. I didn't expect to. Nora reached into a box and handed her a green block. If you make him smile again, I'll forgive you. Isaac returned home an hour later. He found Eleanor sitting cross-legged on his floor, a plastic dragon in her hand, and Nora fast asleep beside a Lego fortress missing one wall. He stared for a moment, then sat on the edge of the couch. I wasn't sure you'd come. I didn't plan to, she said, but your daughter builds strong cases. He smiled faintly. She stood, brushing Lego dust from her skirt, then handed him a note, the official seal of Vanguard Cinertech, and one-line Investor Summit primary presenter invite. He looked at it, then at her. I'm not a performer. I'm not asking you to perform. You want me to take the stage, explain code in front of people who already decided what I'm worth? No, she said. I want you to remind them why they were wrong. He thought about it for 2 days, then wrote back, I'll speak. But no teleprompter, no handlers, no edits. Just me. Eleanor's reply came an hour later. Good. That's who we need. The summit opened on a Thursday morning. Hundreds of suits filled the Ashcroft Pavilion. A new crowd this time. Investors, reporters, executives from 3 continents. Isaac stood backstage in a shirt Nora ironed herself. It was wrinkled anyway, but smelled like cinnamon. He held no cards, no notes, just a drawing from Nora in his coat pocket. Him, Eleanor, and a dragon with glasses. The host called his name. He stepped onto the stage. I'm not here to impress you, he began. I'm here because someone forgot to erase the board. Laughter, a few confused glances. That's how it started. A problem worth $100 million, fixed by someone no one saw coming. He walked slowly, like a teacher in front of a chalkboard. We keep trying to build machines that think like humans, but we forget humans don't think like checklists. He drew a child's tree on the screen. Learning is messy, like raising a daughter, like grieving, like deciding to trust again. He paused. I'm not the smartest guy here, but I've cleaned up after a lot of them, and I've learned sometimes the person closest to the floor sees the cracks before they become fault lines. A hush fell over the room. No applause yet. Then Eleanor stood and started clapping. Slow, steady. Others followed. Not polite, not mandatory. Earned. Backstage. Frank was waiting with a grin. That wasn't a presentation, he said. That was a scalpel. Isaac wiped his hands on his jeans. I said what needed to be said. You're not going back to the mop closet. You know. Isaac raised an eyebrow. The board voted, Frank said. You've got a new title, Senior Innovation Advisor. Isaac didn't respond right away, then nodded once. For Nora, he didn't move back to the 6th floor. He kept his old ID badge, kept the mop, 2 stored behind his desk, just in case. Sunday mornings were sacred again. No alarms, no reports, just pancakes. Nora stood on a chair at the stove, stirring batter with more enthusiasm than skill. Eleanor sipped coffee from a chipped mug, wearing one of Isaac's old flannel shirts like it belonged to her. She's been in there for 20 minutes, she whispered. Could mean magic, Isaac replied. Could mean smoke. Should we check? He smiled. Let's live dangerously. From the kitchen, Nora called. No peeking. They obeyed. Later. They sat by the window as the sun filtered through the blinds. Pancakes slightly burnt. Laughter not. Eleanor leaned her head on Isaac's shoulder. You think this lasts? She asked quietly. Isaac looked at Nora, humming to herself while drawing stars on a napkin. Then at the Lego dragon on the windowsill. Then back at Eleanor. It already has,